Attorney General in the state of Texas that you're actually proud of. One that comes from this community who shares our values and is going to be looking out for all of us. She does not care if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, if you're an independent, if you're 5 generations of Texan as she is, or if you just got here 5 days ago. She wants to make sure that the law applies equally to all of us, including and especially those in the highest positions of power and public trust in this state. And our current Attorney General has so badly failed on even the lowest bar. In fact, he may soon be disbarred in the state of Texas because he's under active FBI investigation. He's been indicted. We are all awaiting his trial. The justice he is supposed to represent, to stand for, and to fight for. And I'm just so glad that Rochelle is on this ticket with us, is in this room with us right now. She is a fighter. And the fact that she can carry the story of this community to the other 253 counties of Texas is really powerful. Because as a fellow from Fronterizo, from El Paso, Texas, our communities are so often misunderstood and spoken for by other people who frankly have never been here before, right? And they tell us what we need and what we have to be scared of and what we must guard against. In fact, if I didn't know better, if this were not my 6th visit to the Rio Grande Valley just since we launched this campaign for governor, I might be forgiven for being afraid when I came down to this community. Our current governor wants me to be scared of the invasion that is coming into this country right now through this community. Those people who are coming to get us and to get our kids, it is so dangerous, he told us in 2019, that we must take matters into our own hands. We must defend ourselves, the governor said to the state of Texas, from this invasion. Well, there was this guy in Allen, Texas, who heard him loud and clear. In fact, he went out and purchased an AK-47. This is a weapon that was originally designed for use in war, in combat, on a battlefield. It's high impact, high velocity round. When it hits your body, it destroys everything inside. It pulverizes your blood vessels, your arteries, your organs, the soft tissue. You just bleed out before we can even begin to think about saving your life. It's what it was intended to do. When our guys and gals are on the battlefield, we want to take the other guys and gals down. As awful as that is war, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what it's designed to do. But imagine this guy hearing about this invasion and buying that AK-47 in Allen, Texas, and driving 600 miles from my hometown of El Paso and arriving there on the 3rd of August, 2019. And walking into that Walmart, it was the Saturday before school began that next Monday. So kids and grandkids are in there with their folks and their grandparents, buying their notebooks and their backpacks and their pens and their pencils and all their supplies for the school year. And in walks this guy with this weapon of war and this battle armor that he has on, and begins shooting and killing the people who are there. 23 of our fellow human beings would lose their lives from a guy who posted just minutes before that massacre that he came to repel the Hispanic invasion that he'd been warned about here in the state of Texas. I make this point because not only do we shake our heads when we hear someone like Greg Abbott or Ken Paxton or Dan Patrick or Donald Trump describe our communities as these war zones and talk about all the walls that we need to build up, all the militarization, the infestation. That was a word used to describe immigrants. Animals was another term the former president used to describe those people seeking asylum and refuge in a country that is by and large comprised of refugees and asylum seekers going back more than 400 years. It not only annoys us, it not only runs counter to our experience in our hometowns. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this is life and death for our country. Now just imagine if those in power who are trying to scare us about immigrants and about the border, and we will pause for a second to acknowledge, are there dangers at the border? Absolutely. There are people who are trying to cross illegal drugs into this country. There's an epidemic of fentanyl abuse and overdose deaths, and we should do everything within our power to stop those who would come here to harm us. I'm on board for that. all day long. There are those who would traffic human beings into this country. And that is something that runs counter to our values, to our way of life, and to our laws. And let's make sure that we uphold the law at the U.S.-Mexico border. But those who are coming here to contribute to the success of this country, while they seek a better life for themselves and their kids, those whom I've met in Brownsville, picking onions all day long, crossing sometimes in between ports of entry for the ability to provide the food upon which all of us depend. Families who've been separated, as Rochelle just talked about, by the previous administration. Kids kept here, mom and dad sent back to Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador. Their families trying to reunify again. I mean, I don't need to tell you, but we need to tell everybody else. That's what's happening here right now. And they want us to be afraid of literally the most vulnerable human beings that I can imagine. In fact, that I have met, and I've been there when these families have been reunified at Annunciation House, this wonderful Catholic charity in El Paso, Texas, where a little girl, 5 or 6 years old, is finally reunified with that mom from whose arm she was torn months before. And that kid who's been a stranger in a strange land, doesn't speak the language, doesn't probably know even what country she is in right now, just knows that her mom, over those last 2,000 miles, brought her here and it was taken away from her. When they reunify, there are no smiles, there is no laughter, there are no tears of joy. There is a vacant look in that kid's face. Can I trust you again? You did this to me, Mom. Well, really, we did this to that family. That's what we are doing right now, and it is on all of us, not just those in power, for as long as we accept this as our future, as our fortune, and as our fate. And I ask you, all of us, to use the power of our imagination. What if we had great leaders like Morgan Lamantia or Rochelle Garza, or hopefully if we all come together and win this governor's race? What if we had those in positions of power and public trust who said, look, I'm not going to try to scare you about immigrants. I'm not going to try to scare you about transgender kids using a bathroom that's going to freak you out. I'm not going to arrest their parents on charges of child abuse and remove those kids from their families' homes and those loving parents and put them into a foster care system with 32,000 kids in it today, where many of those children are going to be sleeping in CPS offices tonight in the hallways, under the desks, and on top of the tables, where 100 children, ladies and gentlemen, mark my words, have lost their lives in the CPS system since the year 2020. I'm not going to try to scare you about women making their own decisions about their own body, their own future, their own health care, their own choices. What if the governor said, I'm really worried, and if you want to use the word scared, maybe I'm scared, about the NRA, that after every single one of these massacres and tragedies, the response isn't, how do I save kids from being shot in the face? How do I save those shoppers in Walmart from being killed in front of their grandkids? How do I stop Sutherland Springs or Santa Fe High School or Midland, Odessa, where 7 people were killed by a guy with an AR-15? It is, how do I sell more of these on the streets? And that's exactly the fear that they are operating on right now. Now listen, those in positions of power, whether it is our mayor, our council members, our governor in this case, number one priority has to be keeping us safe, keeping all of us safe. And when I think about what just happened in this state in Uvalde just 2 weeks ago, I think about how badly we have failed one another, and especially our kids. This is not an act of God. It is not unpredictable. It is not purely evil, though evil may be the best description we can come up for this. This is something that is born of the decisions that we as a people have made together. We know that universal background checks, where everyone has to go through some kind of due diligence before they purchase a firearm, will save lives. That Midland, Odessa shooter who killed 7 people couldn't pass a background check before a federally licensed firearm dealer. So because we don't have universal checks in Texas, he could buy from a private seller out of the trunk of his car and use that weapon to kill people in his community. How about red flag laws? They're sometimes called extreme risk protection orders. This is where when someone's not acting right, they say, hey, I may want to shoot up my school, I may want to kill myself. I may want to kill somebody in my life. We intervene and remove that firearm before it's too late. That shooter that I mentioned in El Paso who killed 23 people, his mom called the police in Allen, Texas before the shooting and said, something's not right. Something's not right with my guy. And he just bought an AK-47 and this does not add up. And you know what the police said, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing? Sorry, good luck. Nothing we can do. We don't have a law on the books that allows them to do the right thing. Safe storage laws? This was proposed to me by Rhonda Hart, whose daughter was killed by one of her classmates at Santa Fe High School. That classmate, 17 years old, took his parents' unsecured firearms. They weren't locked up, readily accessible to him, walked them into the school, and killed the students in his classroom. Rhonda Hart, Army veteran, gun owner, school bus driver working in the very district where her daughter was killed, said, Beto, this makes common sense to me as a gun owner. We already keep our guns locked up in our house. That's a responsible tradition in the state of Texas. Just make this the law so we don't have to lose more kids. And you would think after one of these, the governor would do the right thing. Two of these, the governor, three of these, four of these, five, six of these. Four of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, a country who spans 246 years, have happened in this state in the last 5 years. And at best we get thoughts and prayers, and I do not want to minimize thoughts and prayers, especially with Reverend Gatling here, because so many of the families that I have met in Uvalde actually have asked me to pray. When I've reached out to them, how can I help you? Is there anything that we as a state can do to help bring you through this tragedy and what you are suffering right now? So many of them have said, please, Beto, pray for us. Pray for my daughter. Pray for my son. Pray for that family member that I lost and I will never get back. And so, yes, I do think we should all pray. But the other thing every single one of those family members that I have listened to has told me is, I want you to act. I want us to act. I never want another mother to feel the way that I feel right now. And that compels me more than anything else, more than how any of these issues poll or our prospects in the election, or whether we offend some powerful special interest in the state, or whether it means fewer dollars flow into this campaign. We ultimately are going to have to account for ourselves, to our conscience, to our kids, to our Creator. Take your pick. And I want to make sure that when that moment comes, I've got an answer for what I did when I could, when we had the opportunity to do the right thing. And that's what this is about. Listen, I hope that there are Republicans here today among us, Democrats, independents as well. This has to be bigger than any one party, any one person, even any one election. This has to be about our kids, and I love that there are so many children here among us right now. It is the reminder for why we are here in the first place. And if we can project into the future, 10, 20 years from now, imagine them fully grown looking back on us at this moment. Mom, dad, grandpa, grandma. When all this was going on in Texas, when Uvalde had just happened, what did y'all do? Did you just accept it? Did you just say, hey, that's the price of being a Texan? We're just going to have to play the lottery. How many of you have been to a completion ceremony for your elementary or middle school kid this last week, or a graduation ceremony for your high school graduate, and you thought, as Amy and I did when we were at our middle school and elementary school completion ceremonies, thank God my kid made it through. It's a terrible thought. It's one I feel guilty for having, and it's mixed with the pride that I feel for the fact that they are completing elementary school and middle school, and not to brag, but both of them made the all-A honor roll as well. But that shouldn't be something that we're thinking about right now, nor should I have to hear when I listen to a teacher in San Antonio, and she said, Beto, I've been teaching for 8 years, I'm not going in for a ninth. And I said, well, why not? And she said, because when I go into my classroom, especially after Uvalde, I'm a chemistry teacher, and I feel lucky that I've got these big lab tables, because I know that my kids can hide behind them. I turn off the lights, I'll lock the door, maybe the shooter will not know that we are in that classroom. Another teacher at that same event in San Antonio says, I've got a 15-year-old daughter, and she just asked me the other day, hey, Mom, when that shooter comes in to your classroom, are you going to die for your kids, or are you going to try to live for me? And she's telling me this through tears coming down her face. I'm almost about to cry as I'm listening to her. Who are we that we've come to this point in our existence? It is not for lack of resources. We're the 9th largest economy on the planet, the state of Texas is. $2 trillion gross domestic product. The biennial budget that our state legislature and governor approves is $250 billion. And lest we think this is video games or mental health or doors, there are doors and video games and mental health challenges in every country on this planet. Uniquely, we have failed to summon the political will and the courage. And really, listen, we love, and myself included, sometimes just to blame one party or one person. It really is on all of us until we change this. And this is why, as Morgan said, we wanted to convene this meeting here tonight. I wanted to share some of my thoughts. I want to hear some of yours. I want to make sure that we're having a conversation, listening to each other, learning, and when we win this election, able to hit the ground running. Because winning is important and necessary, but it is a step along the way. Action, action, action is the key at the end of the day. I want to make sure that to the degree we can, we get on the same page about what that action will entail. But before I leave this subject of the children, the youngest among us, the most vulnerable in this state, let me share 2 other things that are worthy of our attention. In addition to gun violence, and the fact that gun violence is the leading cause of death for kids and teenagers in the state of Texas. Imagine everything that could get them or come for them or happen to them. And it is the firearms in this state and those who use them irresponsibly and those in positions of power who refuse to do the right thing because they cower to the lobby, to the NRA, to those who have power over their political future. In addition to that, we are the least medically insured state in the country. And right now we sit and stand in the least insured part of the least insured state. What does that mean? It means more kids in Texas go without the ability of seeing a doctor, a psychiatric nurse, being able to fill a prescription. More kids in Texas, hear me out on this, die of diabetes in the year of our Lord 2022 than in any other state. I don't want to bring you all down. I just want to make sure you all understand what is happening. Because I bet you when we are fully informed and on the same page, we're going to do what it takes to overcome this. Governor talked about mental health at that press conference after Uvalde. Listen, I'm all for better mental health. I'm not for blaming shootings on mental health or those who have mental health care challenges, but we're 50th in the nation in mental health care access. The number 1 provider in this state for mental health care, it's a county jail. Largest inpatient mental health care facility is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. Again, not for lack of resources. We just don't seem to care about those who really need the care and the help and the attention. And listen, you may have a cold heart, you may have a warm heart. You may say, listen, they got to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Who cares that it's happened to them? It's not happening to me. I'll just tell you, when they are doing better, we are all doing better. When they're able to live to their full potential, work that job, take care of their families, finish their education, there's no stopping them. There's no stopping us. One other thing on these kids that I want to share with you. I mentioned Child Protective Services earlier. I mentioned 100 kids whose lives have been lost. This may be news to some of us. I just want to share with you, it's not news to those in power. The legislature and our governor have been warned for the last 6 years by a sitting federal judge. Her name is Judge Jack. And 6 years ago, she issued an opinion from the bench, and she said something like this. Dear Governor, these kids in our foster care system who've been taken from their homes, who may have lost all their parents and relatives, they emerge at age 18 more damaged than when they went in. We're hurting these kids who've already been hurt even worse than they were before. We got to do something. Well, 6 years later, in January of this year, she issued a new opinion. And she said, as bad as that situation was before, it has gotten much worse. Not for lack of resources, for lack of political will. There is no lobbyist for foster care There are no foster children who make million-dollar contributions to elected officials. There are no ribbons to cut. There are no headlines that you can claim. There's only perhaps the most important among us, those who have no one else to fight for them. So I describe all of this for the adults in the room, those who are eligible to vote and eligible to join me in knocking on the doors of other eligible voters in the Rio Grande Valley. These kids are largely defenseless. And I know that. I mean, I've got an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old. We have a microwave, and they can't even make their own dinner. So they need someone to look out for them, right? They need someone to protect them. They need someone to defend them. They also can't vote. They are literally powerless in determining who will control the destiny of this state. But we are not. In fact, they are counting on us right now. I ask you to think about 10, 20 years from now, as they look back on us, how will we acquit ourselves? This is a choice that we all have to make at this moment. There will be, over the course of this meeting, you'll see people who are wearing yellow vests. And they are not the road crew who just came in from street repairs. They are folks who are wearing these yellow vests so they can be easily recognized because they have on those clipboards that they are carrying a list of canvases or block walking opportunities where, and I'm making this one up, but Saturday on Main Street at 10 a.m., we're gathering to go knock on doors. If that doesn't work for you, 11 p.m. on Sunday or 6 p.m. on Monday, these are all listed out. You have a menu from which you can choose. We want you to sign up with one of these volunteers and commit yourself to talking to the voters who are not here today. We may all get on the same page by the end of this meeting. We may be fired up to win this election so we can deliver for those who are counting on us right now. But if we do not bring in other people, I'll give away the ending right now, we will lose. And on election night, we'll say, shit, I wish I had done more. I wish I had not just tweeted and voted. I wish I hadn't just cheered when Beto was in town. I wish I had gone out and done the hard work. It's 101 degrees, says the thermometer on our van as we pulled in right now. Knocking on doors, you're going to be sweaty, you're going to be smelly. But imagine when that person opens the door. They may not see the TV ad we make. They may not hear my radio interview. They may have given up Facebook and social media first for Lent, and then they just said, hey, this is great, and to hell with it, I'm never going to get on it again. But when you show up, another human being locks eyes with them, face to face, human being to human being, they will never, ever, ever forget that. 7 million Texans who were eligible to vote in 2020 didn't cast a ballot. 7 million people in this state, in the most consequential presidential election of our lifetimes, did not vote. Not because they're lazy, not for any lack of love for this great democracy, but in the most voter-suppressed state in the Union, it is made purposefully hard on some to vote to elevate the power of others. Those who have a harder time are counting on us to show up. And when pollsters are able to identify them and reach out to them and say, why the heck didn't you vote? Number one reason given, no one asked me to vote. You could literally be the person to ask them to vote. We only lost by 216,000 votes in 2018. 7 million people out there who have yet to cast a ballot. And there are hundreds of thousands of them in the Rio Grande Valley, waiting for us to show up. From your own heart, in your own words, in your own way, you tell them. You don't have to say anything that I just said. You tell them why you're voting in this election, why you've taken the pain of showing up at their door. I tell you what, they're going to come in and they're going to be with us and we are going to win. That's what it's going to take. Can I just take speaking of pollsters, can I just take an informal poll? If you're willing to knock on doors with us, will you raise your hand? Yeah. All right. Cynthia, I'm counting like awesome. 50 people.
I say 100.
Okay, so you say 100. Yeah. That's a little bit of inflation on the numbers, but that seems to be going around Texas right now under Abbott. So thank you all for agreeing to do this. And last thing that I want to say, I really was so touched. I was really so moved to come in and see Fruti Villarreal and to hear his corrido that he composed after Uvalde and to have him fire us up for the next 5 months and 1 day. That's all that lies between us and the 8th of November. And to give us a reminder of why we got to go out there and fight and win this election. Ruthie, thank you so much for everything. Thank you all for being here. Looking forward to what you have to say. Grateful for the fact that you are here. So Cynthia's got a microphone. She will bring it to you right now. There are so many things that we can talk about. I wanted to center my comments on our kids, but you are welcome to raise any other issue. I had a great meeting in Brownsville earlier with educators and school teachers and counselors and speech therapists and librarians. If we want to talk about public ed and how we have the backs of our world-class public school educators, I'm all for it. If we want to talk about climate, if we want to talk about jobs, if we want to talk about immigration, you name it, you are literally going to call the tune. I will respond, and we'll get as many voices into the conversation. Cynthia Cano, who's got the other mic, will bring it to you if you raise your hand, and then she will disinfect it with a Clorox cloth that she has ready to go in between the speaker.
I wanted to also acknowledge the McAllen School Board member, Conrado Alvarado.
Beto, thank you for coming down here. Just wanted to tell you, a few years ago, McAllen IC voters allowed the school district to pass a TRE, tax ratification. And with that money, we put a police officer in every school in elementary. We changed our front of our schools. But I bring that up because it's a shame that we had to do it at a local level. The current governor does not care about public schools. That fund should come down to all of us, because not all those school districts around here across the state have the same thing. And right now with the shooting, he should have called a special session and got more money into the schools so they can start planning for the next school year, getting police officers, getting more security for our schools. And also, it's no secret, teachers are leaving. They're tired of testing. They're tired of, COVID took a lot out of them from having to teach at home and in person and danger of COVID and all that. Now you have the fear of the fear of shootings, what happened in Uvalde, they're done. And so unless we do something to entice them and keep them and pay them more, because a lot of them have to do more than just one job in teaching. They have to do other jobs just to make ends meet. So you're absolutely right. If we don't take action now, shame on us. Because when you're talking about right now where you came close on the last election, I was also one of those. I cheered for you, I voted, I had my sign, I did everything. But the one thing, and I got people out to the votes, to vote for you last time. But this time, it's not going to just be my family and friends. It's going to be people that I know or don't know knock on the door and says, we need a change, and we need it desperately. Our kids deserve better. So thank you for coming over here. Thank you for listening. And I just encourage everyone out here that we have to commit. We have to do better this time around, and we can't just get 5 or 6 people. We have to get 50 each. We have to change this because we need answers, and we need them right now. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for offering to knock on doors. I love that. You're leading by example. Let me address the trustees' comments. You may have read or seen in the news or watched on broadcast television that the governor, in response to 21 people, 19 children, 2 teachers, and 22 if you count the teacher's husband who died of a heart attack in the days after. In response to that, he's called for a committee. Now, I can call for a committee. You can call for a committee. We might as well call all of ourselves a committee today. Uniquely, the governor of the state of Texas can call for a special session. It's a legislative session. It convenes all the lawmakers, and they can literally make laws that the governor can sign. If I were governor, with your help and your power, here's what I would put on the special session agenda that I would convene immediately. Number 1, common sense steps to reduce gun violence in Texas in our schools, universal background checks, red flag laws, extreme risk protection orders. And I put this one out there, and we may have debates on it. We might have to compromise a little bit, but I have to do everything in my power to get AR-15s and AK-47s out of our communities so we don't have to worry about going up against them in our schools, in our movie theaters, in our supermarkets, or in our churches. 2, I'd say, listen, we do have some mental health care challenges. I know it was raised by the governor. Let's address it. I would expand Medicaid in the state of Texas and bring $10 billion of your federal tax dollars back in to the state, hire more providers, connect more people with care. And to the trustees' comments about public education, I put on the agenda, we are going to cancel the START test. And we are going to replace it with something that educators come up with that does a far better job of providing the diagnostic that we need in our classrooms. I would raise teacher pay at a minimum by $7,500 a year. I'd ensure that retired teachers get a cost of living adjustment. They haven't had one in almost 20 years. And then we're going to invest in things that make sense for all of us. Universal pre-K for every single family, regardless of income or zip code. And we're going to treat teachers like the professionals that they are. Right now, this governor's attacking them. Don't you dare teach critical race theory. No elementary school is teaching critical race theory in this state. Another thing he wants you to be afraid of right now. Oh, by the way, I want you to turn in the parents of that transgender student in your classroom. I'm going to defund your schools by turning your tax dollars into vouchers and sending them to private schools. All the ways he's making it even harder for these teachers who've survived 2 years of a pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, whose children in front of them have lost their grandparents in some cases. Their folks have lost their jobs. They may have lost their homes. Those educators are literally keeping kids alive right now. And to the gentleman's point, we are losing them by the thousands. My Henry, my 11-year-old, my guy who just completed 5th grade, he did not have a permanent classroom teacher this entire year. 5 different substitutes, and God bless the substitutes. But we're seeing that all over the state. Let's get the backs of our public school educators. That is key to the safety and well-being of our kids. That's going to be our special session agenda when we win this. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Welcome home. I grew up 10 blocks away from here, and I remember standing up there because we were poor, we didn't have air conditioning. And so we would come to this library so we could stay cool. And guess what? We learned to learn. We love to learn. We read National Geographic. We're talking 1967, that's how old I am. As I was running COVID-19, I met a lot of people here in the county. My name is Dr. Melendez. I'm your health authority. I'm so proud to say that. Thank you. And I don't know, 6, 7 months ago, Mr. O'Rourke came to my home. And it reminded me in 1977 when I won the state drama competition and went to Broadway, because I was going to be on Broadway. And so I thought I was going to be a politician, because I saw so many things that were being done purely for promotion of their career. We had a hospital promised to us by Franklin Graham and his folks. Promised. We had 1,200 people in the hospital with COVID. Today we have 28. We had one promise. He came down, he closed it in Central Park and said, you guys have 5% mortality, worse than most of the countries in the world. You need it. 100 beds, doctors, ventilators. I cried that day. I'm about to cry right now. I cried. I was so happy. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. We were going to get help. The next day I get a call from the organization, Franklin Graham. They called Samaritans First, and he said, Governor Abbott's not willing to provide, I guess they're called waivers for doctors and nurses that don't have licenses in Texas. I go, what do you mean? That's just what happens. That's national. He said, it's just bad optics, Doc. It's bad optics. If we have a religious organization come down and help us, it's just going to make the governor and his office look bad. And I know you're not a politician. It's just bad optics. I was so infuriated. I couldn't believe that because of bad optics. You know, someone had to die for you to get a bed in the ICU. The optics, who the hell cares? We want to help for our people. I was so angry, I said, I'm going to run for Congress. And the reason I'm saying this is because when I went to Broadway, I was trying to get parts. You'd have guys that danced like Baryshnikov and looked like Brad Pitt and sang like Beyonce. And I realized, man, I'm just a guy from Hackberry and Main Street. And I could just play on the little keyboard, sticks. And so my point is, these are real artists. These are people that we only dreamt of. And when I met this character, I said, wow, this is a real leader. I lost all self-importance You can tell I love microphones. I love all self-importance because he was a real deal. This guy's a real deal, man. I'm not here today to talk about him. I'm so moved. Second time I meet him. He's a real deal. There's a lot of talkers and doers, but leaders are people who are willing to stand up and say no matter what because it's going to help what they believe in. And they're affable and they're intelligent. When he talked about, I run the jails, the Hidalgo County jails, and I'm the physician. 80% of our people there have mental illness. He's correct. Everybody that is ill in the valley gets treated in jail. When he talks about Medicaid and not funding, the number one funder for Medicaid, for psychiatric health, is Medicaid. We are 50 out of 51 areas in the country in mental health for children. 50 out of 51. That's ridiculous. 20% of access in the state of Texas to health care, 20% of people don't have access. In the valley, it's 40. In the nation, it's 10. We're the most obese, the most diabetic, the most hypertensive, the poorest, the least educated, the least access to health care. That's who we are. And when you're a little kid standing up there in 1966 and now you're here, man, we have a responsibility. So we have to become leaders. But some of us have the skill set. And other of us have to be supporters or technicians, people who give recommendations to the true leaders. And so when I tell him, when a bullet comes out of a handgun, and the speed of that 9mm bullet is 1,200 feet per second, but an AR-15, it's 3,400 feet per second. When I tell him, when I'm in the ER, I've been an ER doctor for 22 years and a physician for 37, and we see injuries that come in with handguns, it's like a knife. But when we see an AR-15, it's like a grenade. When we recommend these things as technicians to those people that are in power, and why are they in power? Because we elected them. Not because they're tall, it's because we elected them. And so they have a great responsibility, and so do we as citizens. There are people here that mow lawns, and there are people here who operate on brains, and there's people in between, all equally the same. We have our own, where the dirt hits our experience. It's our responsibility to keep our leaders informed of what is really going on. And we have some fantastic people in our community. Fantastic people. You met Mama Tia, you met these fantastic people. We are not second to anybody in the country for who we are. We just need to have that opportunity. So one, Beto, there is no doubt that assault weapons, of which I own 5. I have my own firing range. I'm a responsible gun owner. I believe in gun ownership, responsible gun ownership. I'm a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan because when 9/11 happened, I walked it, I not just talked it. I went and I enlisted. I have my guns, they're at my house, they're under lock and key. I go to the range, I put my gun, I'm responsible. But these weapons are designed to kill people, period. You can talk about what you want. I don't go deer hunting with my AR-15. It's just that doesn't happen, right? And so number one, you're correct. Number two, yes, complicated issues have complicated solutions. So it's not just mental health. It's just not hardening our school. It's not just making sure the people who are not mentally capable to carry a gun don't get them. It's a combination of all. And it's all of us, because if you notice what's happening to us, especially those of us of color and those of us around the country, we're always divided. It's either Fox or CNN. And we get lost in the nonsense of whether you have to be 18 or 21 or 21 and a half or 25. Or if the mag is 12 bullets or 10 bullets. That's nonsense. 95% of the people here and around the country agree on everything. On everything. So let's focus on that 95% and let's not be divided by that 5% that we disagree with. And so my comments to you is that, well, I'm proud. I'm proud to be your friend. And I'm proud and incredibly impressed that you know all the information. Man. Like if you're in the operating room with me, I'm just amazed that you know all the stats. So thank you for gracing me.
I want to thank Dr. Melendez. And I first met him, as he said, at his home. I wanted to understand the toll that COVID had taken in class of 78. There we go. You might be able to tell us why he was reading National Geographic. But, to his point, in our communities, El Paso, Texas, my hometown, was for a while the deadliest city in the United States, bar none, for COVID fatalities. And he mentioned all the comorbidities, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. We have that in El Paso as well. We need to work on that. But when we were literally fighting for our lives, there was not one mobile morgue set up in El Paso during the worst of it. There were 10 mobile morgues set up in El Paso. At a time that the governor's involuntarily activating members of the Guard to go to the border to do, I'm not exactly sure what constitutionally they can do. We had members of the Guard coming to El Paso to move the bodies. There were not enough people to move the dead in my community. I knew some of them, as I know that Dr. Melendez has treated some of them that he has lost, and you all have family members that you have lost. While that was happening, our county judge, Ricardo Samaniego, was fighting our governor, who was preventing him from implementing the public health orders that their public health authority, like Dr. Melendez, had said, this is going to save people's lives, Judge. You got to do this here, or we're going to lose more people unnecessarily, totally preventively. And the governor would not allow him to do that. I don't know the motive. We should never ascribe it or attempt to divine it. But whatever it was, he was either unwilling or unable to partner with and help people who literally needed the ability to stay alive. And so my hat's off to Dr. Melendez and others who, regardless of the obstacles, did everything in their power to save people. We lost more than 87,000 of our fellow Texans and counting so far over this pandemic. The number would have been much greater, but for people like this. This is a hero to me. Thank you for being here and for everything that you just said. Grateful to you.
Upstairs.
Hello, Beto. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Bear with my accent. I'm a Texican, baby. Thank you so much for adopting me, Texas. I love it. This is my home. So, Beto, I'm Augusto Contreras. I wrote this because this is how important it is to me, right? I'm a city commissioner, an artist, a business owner, and an educator. I feel like a lot of our violence crisis has to do with the lack of love in our education system. On my 14 years experience as a teacher, I can assure you we fail our children, and our students are studying for the test. You know that they're pursuing a grade, they're pursuing a number. They're no longer engaged. You know, they're not studying for critical thinking, for love, for dialogue, for faith. They're just competing to each other, right? So one, I want to put two terms in your agenda just in case your team hasn't happened yet: co-intentional pedagogy and pedagogy of the oppressed. And I'm more than willing to share any of those terms with you. And second, I want to know your stance on the Texas education system and what I said regarding the lack of love in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Contreras. I haven't heard those phrases before, and so now I at least know the words, and I got to follow up with you to understand what they mean and to figure out how we work together to improve outcomes for our kids. To the other point that you made, you know, I think about, you know, my son Henry that I was talking about just completed elementary school at Mesita Elementary. When I was a young kid, there was no middle school. You did Mesita Elementary to 7th grade. You started El Paso High at 8th grade. And I remember my 6th grade teacher at Mesita was Mrs. Strummer, Mary Strummer. And man, she believed in me. And she loved me. She really did. And I had, maybe every kid does, I had self-confidence issues, self-doubt. You know, who am I? Why am I on this planet right now? You know, issues with my parents, like everybody has issues with their parents. And she was just there for me. Day in, day out, I struggled in some of these subjects, including math, that I never outgrew. I was in remedial algebra for every year of high school, by the way, despite Mrs. Strummer. But she changed, and I could even argue saved my life. And I know she did that for countless other kids. I know that we all had a Mrs. Strummer in our lives, and I know that your students had a Mr. Contreras in their lives. And we've got to get back to that, to your point. And I'll just give you an example of where our priorities have been so skewed in this current era. I mentioned the STAR test earlier. You know, why do I mention that? Because my kids get so anxious before the STAR test, because their teacher is so anxious before the STAR test, because her principal is so anxious before because the superintendent, et cetera, on up to the trustees, and who knows where it stops. The only one the STAR test seems to do well for is the maker of the STAR test, a corporation that gets hundreds of millions of dollars from the taxpayers of states like ours. But the point was driven home to me. My favorite book in the world is The Odyssey. And again, unlocked for me by some teacher who took the time to take me through it. And we even named our son Ulysses, because we didn't have the guts to name him Odysseus. We thought that was just a step too far. But it really made an impact on me. I was talking to another El Paso High student. I think she was a junior at El Paso High at the time. And I said, "What are you reading right now?" And she said, "We're reading the abridged version of the Odyssey." "Well, why are you reading the abridged version of the Odyssey?" It's the greatest book in my opinion. And she said, "We have to set so many weeks aside for standardized high-stakes test prep to learn how to take that test versus having these open-ended conversations with our fellow students, with our teacher, about what these things mean. Why are we reading a book, a story that was first told 7,000 years ago? What is its endurance? What is true about it, consistent through time, different races, different continents, different technologies? It still speaks to a guy like me, I guess, for some reason. They're losing out on those conversations. And then one last point. We were in Laredo, Texas in December of last year, and I met this amazing middle school teacher named Maxine. I'll never forget her because she made such an impression on me. And she said, "Hey, Beto, on this STAR test deal and on your topic of love," she said, "Part of the reason that the STAR test is ridiculous to me is we've just had 2 years of pandemic and learning loss, and this isn't going to measure anything." But she said, "Beto, I'm trying to keep these kids alive. The level of suicidal ideation in middle school right now, the number of kids, and I know we hate to bring it up, but we fail to face it and confront it, will never effectively address it." She said, "We just lost a 14-year-old in my school." She said, "I am keeping them alive." And she's crying, and she says, "All these other teachers have left the profession, which means I get more of their students in my classroom, kids who need more individualized attention, and there's more of them, and I want to give up, but I can't because who will be there for them?" I mean, tell me a better definition of love than that teacher, than you and others who go underpaid and work in a second job in order to make ends meet, are still willing to make that life and death difference for that kid. So I say, let us as a society, as a state, as a government, respect you and the choice that you've made. You didn't do it for the money. You didn't do it for the fame or the glory. You're probably still paying back student loans that you took on for the privilege of teaching our kids, and allow you to connect with them as you see best, because your intention is to unlock that lifelong love of learning, to save their lives in some instances, and allow them to truly fulfill their promise and their potential, as I hope I am doing in Mrs. Strummer's memory, although she's still alive, but I just wanted her to know she did a good job. If you're out there, Mrs. Strummer, thank you. And thank you for being here and for asking this question. What a great one. Yeah, really appreciate it.
To your left. To your left.
Left.
Here we go.
The other thing I didn't get beyond math was right and left. So this is left.
Hi, good afternoon, Beto. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pretty nervous, but
You're doing great.
yeah, sorry. But so I was born and raised here in McAllen. I'm 19 years old. I've lived here my whole life, and I love it here. Honestly, I love everything about this community.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. We need to hear that more often.
Yeah, and right now I'm a sophomore in college, but I was in a private school my whole life until I was in 8th grade, and then I started going to public school. And during high school, I went through 3 school shooting threats. The school responded properly. We had a clear bag policy, and we also had IDs and a bunch of hall passes, but it felt surreal that I went through that 3 times during high school. And honestly, like the first time it was pretty scary. The second time it wasn't as scary. The third time it was just like, okay, like it happens everywhere, which is kind of sad that this has been normalized. This is something that has been happening since the 90s, so it's a new phenomenon, but it's honestly concerning that this happens so often. And even this year, while attending college, they arrested a professor at my school because he was planning to do a mass shooting, and he was a math teacher. I don't want to say the institution's name out of respect or the professor, but he was literally teaching math like up top, like on top of me. He was on the second floor. And you know, in college we have group chats for our classes, and everyone was just talking about it. Everyone was scared. They were like, how can a teacher like plan something like that? And like everyone was nervous. Nobody wanted to go to school. Everyone was like, I'm just going through Zoom. I went through Zoom. I wasn't even going to go to the math building because I had to go at 9:30 in the morning. And I was just like, no, I'm not gonna risk it. I don't want like a copycat or someone like that, because we've seen a lot of copycats that they're just like, they just see like a mass shooting or a school shooting, and they just, I don't know what goes through their mind, but they want to do it too. And hopefully when you win, you will, hopefully when you win, you'll pass strict gun laws that will probably end this, or at least minimize it, because it's honestly, it's surreal. Like this was this year in January, and I was like, what the heck? I even told my mom, I was like, how is this possible? Like, it's happened 4 times that we've had school shooting threats, or at least that I've experienced, and it's honestly, it's horrible. And thankfully nothing happened, but I don't want parents going through this, or children being nervous about going to school, because then they're not going to focus as much. And I saw so many people that were nervous even like the month after. They were like, oh, what if it's not a teacher, what if it's a kid, what if it's like someone random? Like, yeah, I mean, when you do win, I hope you can pass stricter gun laws, so this won't happen.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you just said. And I just got to tell you, on behalf of my generation, I'm 49, I'm going to be 50 in a few months. I apologize, because it is on us, it's on my generation. I mean, I don't remember how old I was when Columbine happened, but we thought it was just such a bizarre, unique, quote unquote, act of evil. When you say act of evil, that's in God's hands. It's those are biblical terms, those are supernatural terms, that's not us. It's like the weather or a tornado or an earthquake. And as you said again and again and again, to the point I remember when the Santa Fe high school shooting happened in 2018, and you know, the news crews are right on the scene, and they're interviewing kids and teachers as they're coming out, and they stick the microphone in this one girl's face, and they said, you know, were you shocked? How did you feel when the shooter came into your classroom? And she said, oh, I expected that to happen. You know, like you just said, like the first few caught your attention, and then, well, I mean, what do you expect? This is what happens in the United States of America, especially right now. This is what happens in the state of Texas. So yes to everything you just said. We can do it. And to the doctor's point earlier, listen, we are a proud Second Amendment state. We have a long tradition of responsible gun ownership. I grew up with guns in the house. I grew up with my dad and my uncle teaching me how to shoot, but also the responsibility of owning that gun. Where you point it, where you don't point it, where we keep it, what happens when our friends come over and they want to see dad's gun, make sure that gun is locked up. Same things that we teach our kids right now. We can get back to that level of responsibility and away from this NRA-fueled worship of these machines that were designed only in some cases, I use the AR-15 and AK-47 as an example, to kill human beings. They're just really, really good at that. And then things that boggle the mind in terms of who could come up with an idea like permitless carry that says anyone can carry a gun on the streets without any background check. And I'm not talking about anyone can buy a gun and have it at home with no background check. Anyone in Texas now, after last year, thanks to Abbott, is allowed to carry that gun on the streets, and in some cases on our campuses, without a background check, without any training, without any vetting whatsoever. And this last point that I want to make to you, in case you wonder whether that makes us a little bit less safe, over the last 5 years, 38,000 times law enforcement denied a license to carry permit from a Texan who wanted to carry a gun in public. They said, listen, you have a domestic abuse conviction on your record. You are a violent felon. You have posed a danger to yourself or to someone else. No, we're not going to allow you to have a loaded gun in public because you're going to use it on somebody. 38,000 times, 38,000 different people, that was the decision. And now imagine this, how many tens of thousands more never applied for a license to carry because they knew they wouldn't pass the background check. Those 38,000 plus the tens of thousands more, all are able to carry guns on our streets right now, totally within our control and within our power. But to be clear, we've got to win this election. This is ultimately decided by political power, and for as long as we are a democracy, and it's an open question some days in this country, and especially in this state, but as long as we are a democracy, government of, by, and for the people, this is on all of us. So we've got to get out there. And last thing, I love the fact that you just said you're 19 years old. This is going to be his first election, and he's going to vote on this. And if we win by one vote, it is you. And we're grateful that you're here. Thank you.
There's a lot of hands up. I'm going to do my best to get to as many as I can.
Thank you so much. My name is Liza Garcia. This is my husband, David. I love him. He's a teacher, and I am very proud of him. He's a special needs educator for all children. We don't have children ourselves, but for his students, He loves his students, and he loves everything about them. And in the district that he was in, there was a student who brought a gun to school. And I found out on the news, like most people will do during these situations. And I was beside myself, taking my anxieties, freaking out, trying to hear anything from my husband, texting him, asking if he was okay, knowing that he can't use his phone at school. Trying scared to send the text message because I didn't want him to get caught by anybody. That is it is a frightening thing. And a little more background about me, I'm studying for my master's degree in psychology. So I'm going to school full time, trying to get a job, and my next goal right now is to become a substitute at my husband's high school because I'd rather us work together and to be united as a family. My question to you is, after Uvalde, the governor and everyone else was like, let's arm teachers. Why do we need to arm teachers? Teachers do so much already for everybody. They educate our future generations. They educated you, they're educating me, they educated my husband, and my husband's educating other people. Why do we need to put more pressure on these teachers?
To answer that question, I've asked teachers, right? I may have my own opinion, may have drawn my own conclusions, but if we're asking educators to have a firearm and to have the training and to shoot one of their students if they believe that student is about to shoot somebody else and make that judgment call, let me ask them, how do they feel about it? And I am sure that there's going to be divergence of opinion as we continue to travel the state. But as I have listened to people, and I've been to every single county, and I'm asking questions like these, I'm listening to people like you, there's almost no teacher who feels that as underpaid as they are working two jobs, as stressed out as they are for all the reasons that we talked about, but beyond all that, even if they were paid $1 million a year, even if they were living in the lap of luxury, that is not what they are trained to do. And what we know when we listen to members of law enforcement, for whom we are incredibly grateful, because it is one of the toughest, if not the toughest jobs we ask someone to take on, because those officers, those sheriff's deputies, those members of law enforcement must be willing to lose their lives in order to save the lives of those that they were sworn to protect and to serve. What they'll tell us is, look, Beto, I'm trained, I go to the range, I am continuing to get education on how to be better at what I do. I will miss, X times out of 10. I don't want to quote it, so I'll get it wrong, but I will not hit that target every single time. And we know too many stories of judgment calls made by those who are trained to do this that have gone horribly wrong. Intentionally, unintentionally, innocent people are killed. Now we're going to ask teachers to take on this additional responsibility to decide who they are going to shoot and kill in a given situation like this. And listen, I know that we're still getting the facts from Uvalde. And those parents and that community and all of us, frankly, deserve to understand just what happened. But at a minimum, we know that there were 19 members armed of law enforcement in that hallway outside the door, where an active shooter with 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition was up against completely unarmed kids. In other words, there were good guys and good gals with guns on the scene, unable to end the carnage for 90 minutes while this went on. Absolutely, people made mistakes there, and we're going to find out the truth of the matter. But to think that, as the NRA would tell you, or as Dan Patrick repeats, the only way, or Ken Paxton, the only way we're going to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. If more guns were the answer, there are 330 million of us, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So listen, as the doctor said earlier, there's no single answer to this. We'd love it to fit on a bumper sticker. Just do this thing and you never have to worry about it again. There are a lot of things that we got to do. This is a problem decades in the making. To the gentleman's point, who's 19 years old, his entire life, this has been the story. It's going to take us a little while, but we've got to start doing the right things. Now, in my opinion, since you asked, arming teachers is not one of them. Thank you for asking. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. I am Eric Gardenas, and I'm here with my husband. Hi everybody. So first of all, I want to say I'm here, happy to see you, Beto. And I want to tell you a true story that happened to myself. So I was a victim of sexual assault that happened at a mainstream school that I went. It's a mainstream program. And this doesn't happen to me, but it happens to many deaf students. That they take advantage, they assault them sexually of the deaf students. And it's crazy that this happens. So many of you know that educators and students, they're greatly appreciated in the school's realm, right? But as well, they can take advantage of these students, unfortunately. And some interpreters are not equipped with the certifications that they need for this to render the services. So there's still interpreters who don't have the appropriate credentials that they enter the school systems. That's still saying like it's being taken advantage. And most of you, or a lot of you, right, may not know this, maybe not in the know. So how can we prevent that from happening in the future? To render better services for this, especially in the University of Texas, UTRGV, right, University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, we have a program that we're educating interpreters for them to be professionals when they graduate, and we tell them to be certified or to have that goal. They can work in clinics and hospitals and police stations anywhere in the community because that's where it's needed. It's a big demand that we need interpreters for deaf consumers to have equal access to communication. So we do offer ASO classes. And let's say, for example, for the guns concept that we're talking about, let's say the police, you have to text the police or officer because you can't be able to call them. That's the big issue that we have in the community. That some of the farms, like when the rural areas don't have. So we have to keep that in mind, how we're able to contact. So that's just a story that I wanted to share.
I'm so glad that you are here, and I'm grateful that you're willing to share this story. And we began the meeting by talking about the fact that we expect those in positions of power to look out for all of us, and not just Democrats, not Republicans, not some people, not others, but everybody. And you're helping me understand how we are failing to do that right now. Probably not intentionally, but because we are literally not listening to and seeing people in your situation with your experiences. And it's why we have meetings like these where we want everybody to participate, because I did not know this was a problem until you just shared with me that this is a problem. That's the first step in us being able to make this better, and I hope that you are willing to work with me to find out how we work with first responders, local law enforcement, these accrediting institutions to make sure that we have the resources needed for people who find themselves in the situation that you just described. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
And straight ahead on the ground. So I have time for these 3 more, but if we didn't get to you, we're gonna stay after where that Beto sign is on that side of the room. We're gonna stay and say hi if you all would like to do that.
And you will be approached by one of these construction workers in the yellow vest who's got the clipboard. So just be prepared and be thinking about what you are willing to do personally in terms of meeting voters to get this done. Okay, Ms. Conley.
Mr. O'Rourke, I'm a teacher, and earlier I heard you say we might have to compromise when it comes to the AR-15s. I sat here in this room when I walked in, and the first thing I did was think about the exits and think about where I could die for cover. And I can't help but think of the fact that children just a year younger than my students had to be identified by their DNA. So when you say that we might have to compromise, I want to know exactly what you mean by compromising.
I'll give you an example, just a real world example that I experienced as a member of Congress. We talked about mental health care today. I served on the House Veterans Affairs Committee for 6 years. And at meetings like these, I held a town hall every single month in a public space, just like this library, or this resource center. Everyone was welcome. You hated me, you loved me, you didn't know about me, you had something you wanted to talk about or question me on, you were invited to come. And we literally stayed until they kicked us out, and then we continued the conversation in the parking lot. I kept meeting these veterans who'd say, Beto, no joke, I cannot get into the VA until next year, and it's January, for a mental health care appointment. I served in Vietnam, came back with post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm having a really hard time. I just retired from my job. I'm at this crossroads. And I learned that Vietnam-era veterans were taking their lives at the highest rate of any cohort of veterans who had served this country. It really troubled me what I was learning. And specifically veterans who had what is known as an other than honorable discharge were taking their lives at twice the rate. I just tell you all of that to show you how urgent a priority this was for me. So I wrote this bill, the Honor Our Commitment Act, that says, even if you have an other than honorable discharge, you should be able to get into the VA and see a mental health care provider. Because at the time, the consequence of your other than honorable discharge is you couldn't get into the VA. You were completely out of luck and on your own. I was a Democrat in a Republican majority institution. So that bill was worth all the paper it was written on and nothing more if I couldn't get it passed. So I took it to my Republican colleagues who were in the majority. And they said, I like the idea, I like some of the specifics, but I think you're too generous in some places, and there has to be more of a consequence for people who screwed up. And so what if we change this? And I had a decision to make. Do I go back to this meeting of veterans, and do I say, you know what? I stood my ground. I didn't give in an inch. I didn't get the bill passed, but once we beat those dang Republicans and I get a majority, then I'm going to be able to deliver for you. Or do I take half a loaf, or whatever metaphor you want to use, don't allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, and do something that is actually going to help the people I represent and serve. And that's the choice I made, and we got the bill passed, 435-0 in the House, we got it passed in the Senate, and lo and behold, Donald J. Trump, who I agree with on almost nothing, signed the sucker into law, and we were able to open up health care to people who had been denied it before. And I tell you that because I know I don't like compromise either. I don't think any human being does. We don't start out negotiating against ourselves. And I'm taking some pretty tough positions on issues involving gun ownership in the state. Listen, I believe in the Second Amendment, believe that you should be able to hunt, protect yourself in your home, collect guns, whatever you do with them, that's your business, as long as it is done responsibly and it doesn't harm anybody else. It's certainly not the government's. But on this issue that you just brought up, of these high-powered weapons of war, I do think that is our common business. And every single, for my constitutional scholars, you'll agree with me, every single right that is protected and enshrined in the Constitution is limited. We cannot stand up right now and yell fire in this setting, though we have a First Amendment right to free speech, just like the Second Amendment does not allow you to have a bazooka or a howitzer or drive a tank down. You've drawn a line. You said gun ownership is protected and you have a right to it, but up to a certain point. In 1934, we decided machine guns were on the other side of the line, and effectively we outlawed them with the Federal Firearms Act. And you can own a machine gun today, but it's just really tough, and you have to go through a tremendous amount of licensure to be able to do that. we're having that conversation now on the AR-15. And to be crystal clear, I think we should stop selling AR-15s and AK-47s, and I think we should find a way to get them out of our communities. Not everyone's going to agree, right? But that's where I am. To your question, what does a compromise look like? I mentioned, safe storage laws, universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders. 80% of Texans can agree on all that, más o menos. But most of us, gun owners, non-gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, we can get there. On the issue that you brought up, I just mentioned that earlier, it's a little bit harder. I'm going to do everything I can to get that done for no other reason than I've got to answer to my kids. We're going to say, what did you do, Dad, when you had the chance? Did you trim your sails in order to get elected, to poll better, to get more money donated to your campaign? Or did you stand up? Did you have the courage of your convictions? And I do, and I hope to always be able to demonstrate that to you. But there's a good chance that when we win, we'll be working with a Republican majority legislature. We're going to have amazing state senators like Morgan Lamantia. We're going to have others who are going to proudly represent this community and our state. But we're going to have to collaborate. We're going to have to, in some cases, even compromise. And it's a four-letter word in American politics today. But if we refuse to find the common good, and if we allow the perfect to become the enemy of that good, I may not get anything done. So, super long, way too long answer to your excellent, excellent question. I just want to share with you my values because we won't be able to anticipate every decision I make. I just want you to know how I will make them. I'll do my best to get the most, but then we're going to get something done, if nothing else. Thanks for asking. Really, really appreciate your question.
Hello, Beto. I also hope that you get elected governor as well. If you're elected and you do something, anything, to help make sure that Texas never freeze like we had to do like last year, then you'll be a million times better than Greg Abbott.
Thank you for bringing this up. It's a painful subject for people who, when the temperature dropped, their lights went out, the heat stopped running, the water in their pipes stopped flowing because it literally froze, and then when it unfroze, they burst, and their drywall was ruined, and their floorboards were warped, and they took on cumulatively tens of billions of dollars of damage. An 11-year-old boy in Conroe, Texas, died in his bed because in the energy capital of the world, we could not keep the power going to him or his family. More than 700 Texans lost their lives. And again, as with gun violence, do not allow anyone to tell you this was an act of God or Mother Nature. It gets a lot colder in other parts of the United States. They have no problem ensuring the electricity runs. Our governor was warned repeatedly, there are underlying vulnerabilities in the grid. You've got to weatherize it. And those big donors who give you million-dollar checks, they're going to have to invest in their pipelines, in their facilities to make sure that we can power our homes. He chose to ignore the problem. And then, get this, when the freeze happened and the grid failed, he pegged the price of gas in the state at 200 times the going rate, which means that companies made $11 billion in additional profit in 5 days, largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. Ron Nirenberg originally said that from San Antonio. And to make matters even worse, he passed the cost on to you. On average, our electricity bills have gone up $50 per month per ratepayer across the state, not just this month, not just last month, not just next month, every month going forward for the next 20 years. You talk about inflation in Texas, those property taxes that have gone up on Greg Abbott's watch, those utility bills that are going up on Greg Abbott's watch, when he shuts down the FAR Reynosa port of entry and we cannot bring in the produce that we depend on, our grocery prices going up in the state of Texas, he's the single greatest driver. And to get to the kicker or the punchline, still hasn't fixed the grid. So God only knows if the temperature continues to climb as we run our air conditioners in this state, whether we will have the juice to power our homes when we need it. So to your question, yes, we're going to fix the grid. We don't care what it costs those who are responsible for doing it. They need to do it. We're going to get that $11 billion back. We're going to return it to you to reduce your electricity rates going forward to make sure that you can afford to stay in your home. We're going to connect our grid called ERCOT with the national grid so that we can draw down electrons when we need it. And when we produce a surplus, let's sell it back to the rest of the country. And then we're going to have some kind of independent market monitor so that you can never jack up the price 200 times of gas in this state, because that should be illegal and we need a cop on the beat. Thank you for asking this. It's still on my mind as well. Very grateful to you.
Okay, this is going to be our last question, but again, if you'd like to stay a little bit afterwards, the line is going to be to my left, and we'll be straight ahead where you see that big sign right there that says Beto For Texas. Right there, we'll be right in front of that.
Thanks, Cynthia.
My name is Trent Cannon, and first of all, if you're over 50 and you're in this room, that man right there, Ivan Melendez, Dr. Ivan Melendez, my wife worked with him during the COVID. Shake his hand if you're over 50. He saved Hidalgo County.
Sure did.
Beto, I'm from Houston, Texas, Klein, if you know where it is in North Houston. So I've got some Republican friends, and I got a pretty big Facebook. So I'm not going to door knock, but they want to ask you a question. It's not my question, but if you'll answer it, if that's okay.
Happy to.
The question is, why do you go by the name, I've got two for you, by the way. Why do you go by the name Beto when your heritage is Anglo-Saxon?
I think Fruity wants to answer that question. I'll answer your first question. So, my birth certificate says Robert Francis O'Rourke, named after my grandfather, Robert Lee Williams. There were two Roberts in the house, so my mom, from day one, started to call me Beto. And in case I ever forgot my name, when I was in preschool, there was Beto stitched across my sweater. There was Beto on the back of my jeans, in case, when you're at a friend's house. I have always been Beto. Why my mom chose that instead of Bob or Rob or something else is because I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and every Humberto, Alberto, or Roberto was called Beto as a nickname. So that's why.
I came from Neil Alderman in Vidor, Texas. So the second question is, for legal gun owners, like our friend Mr. Melendez and some others that own guns, my friend Joseph right here, are you advocating confiscating semi-automatic rifles or assault-style rifles? I'm not going to say assault rifles because we know how conservatives get with that. But assault-style rifles, are you advocating confiscating those types of rifles from legal gun owners?
Here's what I'm advocating. I mentioned at the outset of this meeting, there are a number of things, probably limitless within our control, to this question that I'm looking at. Universal background checks, I mentioned how they'll save lives, red flag laws, which are also called extreme risk protection orders, and safe storage laws. And then I mentioned something, and I acknowledge not all of us are going to be on the same page. Not only do I think we should stop selling these weapons in our communities, we've got to find a way to get them out. Now, to the young woman's question asked earlier, there is no unilateral power that the governor has to do this, and the very art and genius of our democracy is that we're going to have to collaborate and concessions and compromise. I want to hear the ideas of your friends, who I bet also have kids just like I have kids, who also worry what happens when somebody comes in with a firearm that can pulverize the insides of their body. I saw the gentleman in the Buc-ee's hat. I've been in a Buc-ee's restaurant, the best in the country, if you ask me. And the guy who's washing his hands next to me says, "Hey, I heard you say that thing about AR-15s, AK-47s. I have, like Dr. Melendez, I have a bunch of them in my home. I'm with you, Beto. I also have kids. I don't need these. I don't use them to hunt. I don't need them for self-defense. I don't think we should have these." Now, there can be other people who reach a different conclusion. I want to respect that as well. Somewhere within that, though, we're going to do far better than we are right now. And if we don't allow fear or what others tell us is politically possible or not to stop us, then I'm confident we're going to find something on Texas terms that is going to save more lives while still defending the Second Amendment. So please share that with your friends as well. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for coming out to Fruki. I want to thank you to Mario, to Reverend Gatlin. Thank you for the opening invocation. Morgan Lamantia will be one of the great state senators that we have. And to Rochelle Garza, our next Attorney General. We are so excited that you all are here. We're going to be hanging out by the back for anybody who wants to say hello. Gracias.